Welcome back. We're going to be talking about the winter in Valley Forge, which was the winter of 1777 to 1778. You'll notice that within our note guides there are some hyperlinks here that you can click on. They're going to take you to different websites and different things that you can see, videos, if you're curious. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can obviously do that, okay? So let's talk about the winter in Valley Forge. So after failing to push the British out of Philadelphia, Washington and about 12,000 soldiers retreated to Valley Forge, just right outside of Philly. If you're going from York to Philly, you've probably driven through it. During the harsh winter, there's little money coming in. And remember, Continental Congress had decided that each state was going to fund for those supplies. So Congress was not supplying enough money to support the supplies and the food that was needed for those soldiers. The Continental Army itself, again, under George Washington's leadership, trained underneath Lafayette and von Steuben as well. While at Valley Forge, disease and exposure to the elements was rampant. So it was extremely cold. People did not have proper footwear. They did not have proper coats, jackets, blankets. If they did have blankets, they had lice, things like that. So it's going to kill nearly 2,000 men. And despite all of that, despite these terrible conditions, because Washington was such a strong leader, this is what kept the men together. Let's talk about a little bit about the Battle of Yorktown as well. This is going to happen in September to October of 1781. So Yorktown is in Virginia. If you have visited Williamsburg or if you have visited Jamestown, it is not far from there. So they call it like the triangle. There's so much history right in that little area. Okay. The Battle of Yorktown is where the Continental Army and the French Navy trap General Cornwallis and his army. So we're talking about the British Army now. They are trapped by the French and the Continental Army. Okay, and they are going to be trapped in a peninsula at Yorktown, Virginia. So right here. So for 3 weeks, the British Army is just bombarded with cannons and artillery fire, and they're stuck there. They're trapped. The British Navy, even though it was the strongest navy in the world at the time, was unable to break through this blockade that was created. And as a result of that, finally, after about 3 weeks, Cornwallis admits defeat and he surrenders. This is the turning point in the war. This is basically the last of the battles where the British acknowledge this is a losing battle at this point, that they are not going to win this war. So Yorktown was that last major battle of the war. Even though there were some battles and skirmishes here and there between the British and French and Spanish, it does happen, but that's the major last battle, okay? And there is a peace treaty that's eventually signed in 1783. We have the Treaty of Paris. That is that declaration, that's that final paper that basically ends the war. So we have the British that's going to recognize the sovereignty and independence of the United States, and they're going to give very generous boundaries. So it's no longer that Appalachian mountain chain range. Now we're going to go all the way to the Great Lakes, to the Mississippi, and all the way to modern-day Florida. So the British agree to give Americans those fishing rights as well, which is off to the Canadian coast. That is a big money maker for Britain, so this is going to be a big loss for them. It's going to only help the American colonies or states at this time. The Americans agree to pay for debts owed to British merchants and confiscated land. So once more, if you look at this map here, before we talked about that proclamation of 1763, you can see my mouse that's kind of tracing it. It was pretty much that Appalachian mountain chain. Well, that's what was gained as a result of the French and Indian War with British territories. This fight for independence, the Revolutionary War, is going to allow for the Treaty of Paris of 1783 now, 20 years later to gain so much more territory. So if we trace that Mississippi River, you can see it's quite a bit of land. So the British are recognizing that this is in fact a nation, that this is an independent country, and it's going to be called the United States. And again, you can see visually. Okay, there is a clip here if you'd like to watch a little bit more about that. I encourage you to do that. So all in all, guys, this is what is the American Revolutionary War. As you can see, there's a lot of information here. We only touched on the most major battles of the war. In our Revolutionary War choice board, you also had exposure to the first skirmishes and some additional battles. War is not just battles. War is not just names and important generals. It's the people who are behind the scenes. So there's women that are playing a role in this part. We have African Americans, we have Native Americans, we have Tories, we have Loyalists, we have colonists. We have they're going to make great strides and that make America what it is in the 1780s.